So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We welcome all of you, particularly those of you joining from far away or at late or early times. Thank you for joining today's WHO EPI-WIN webinar. It's on the new phase of pandemic preparedness, part 2. And it is led by Dr. Sylvie Briand of the Global Pandemic Monitoring Board. Dr. Sylvie Briand was also started EPI-WIN way back during COVID. So it's very appropriate that she leads this webinar today. For those of you new to EPI-WIN, it stands for the WHO Information Network for Epidemics, for Science and Knowledge Translation in Health Emergencies. Our goal is to translate science and knowledge and make it accessible, understandable, and relevant for evidence-informed actions and decisions in health emergency preparedness and response. Today, we have a very eminent list of speakers. Dr. Maha Al-Rabat, former Minister of Health and Population of Egypt. Dr. Palita Karunapena, Director of the Ministry of Health in Sri Lanka. Professor Mika Salminen, who is the Director General of the National Institute of Health and Welfare in Finland. Dr. Lisa Indar, Executive Director of the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And Dr. Abdul Salem Bouye, Regional Emergency Director of WHO Afro. Led, of course, as I mentioned, by Dr. Sylvie Briand of the GPMB Secretariat and Dr. Maya Kita. I will hand over the moderation to Dr. Sylvie Briand for the technical part of the webinar. I now invite Dr. Maha Al-Rabat to provide the opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Spolia, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to open this important discussion on the global pandemic preparedness. So as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a powerful reminder that pandemics don't just strain our health and healthcare systems. However, they disrupt the entire societies and economies around the world and everywhere around us. So countries are still grappling with the consequences. And although we are no longer in the midst of the storm, the path ahead remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that we must be better prepared for the next crisis. In today's interconnected world, the movement of people, goods, and animals means that local outbreaks can spread faster and further than ever before, thus driving the risk of turning into multi-countries epidemics or pandemics. And this reality highlights the urgent needed collective actions, stronger systems, lasting partnerships, and at the same time, we have to realize that the pandemic preparedness is now central to building resilience to global shocks. Future efforts must address to mitigate risks across all sectors, not just within health, and account for the complex interdependencies between nations. Preparedness today must go beyond strengthening the national capacities, and in this moment, more than ever, we need the international solidarity. We must come together to act on the lessons learned of the COVID-19 and prepare and act decisively for what lies ahead. The world has changed, and we are entering a new era of pandemic preparedness, one that demands adaptation to evolving new realities and the integration of hard-earned lessons. Equity must be central and core to this effort. The inequities exposed by pandemics threaten the effectiveness of our responses, and without the deliberate action to address them, our preparedness frameworks will remain incomplete and insufficient. The Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, which was and is established by the WHO Director General and the President of the World Bank, is committed to this mission. We are an independent body tasked with monitoring progress, holding leaders accountable, and advocating for a multi-sectoral inclusive approach to health crisis preparedness by listening to leaders from around the world, we aim to chart a clearer path toward a safer future. And finally, I want to highlight the recent milestone achieved by the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, which agreed on the draft text of the pandemic treaty, set to be discussed at the World Health Assembly next week. This treaty represents a remarkable step forward with the commitment of all 194 WHO member states. We are laying the foundation for a stronger framework for international cooperation in the face of future global threats. A virus knows no borders, neither should our solidarity. So thank you all, and I look forward to the discussion ahead. And now I give the floor to Dr. Sylvie Brion, the head of the GPMB Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahal El-Habat, and also welcome to all of you to this WHO EPI-WIN webinar jointly hosted with the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. And many thanks to the WHO EPI-WIN team for organizing this webinar. To complement what Dr. El-Habat has said, a few words about the GPMB. It's an independent monitoring and accountability body to ensure preparedness for global health crisis. It was established in 2018, following the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. And I take this opportunity to thank the co-chairs of the GPMB, Mrs. Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic, former president of Croatia, and Joy Pumafi, former Minister of Health, Botswana, as well as all the board members, including Dr. Mahal El-Habat, for their commitment to make the world a safer place. The COVID-19 pandemic has had profound economic, social, and health consequences across all regions and income groups. Everyone suffered from COVID. However, the impact of the pandemic has been different and variable in different settings and contexts. So the GPMB and the EPI-WIN joined forces to host this webinar on the new phase of pandemic preparedness to take stock of what we learned during COVID-19 pandemic and how the world can prepare and prevent for the next catastrophic event. So this is our second webinar on this topic, on the new phase of pandemic preparedness. The first one focused on Asian Pacific region countries. And this time we are delighted to have speakers from other regions of the world. So we invited high-level senior officials from different countries or regional entities to share their insights on the new phase of pandemic preparedness. And we are honored and really very grateful that these distinguished speakers accepted this invitation. We have asked them two questions. What are the top lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic? And how has the experience of COVID-19 modify or will modify preparedness efforts in your countries or region? Today, we have senior leaders from Finland, Sri Lanka, and representatives from two regional organizations, CARPHA in the Caribbean and the WHO African Regional Office. So let's start with the North and with Professor Mika Salminen. Professor Salminen is the Director General of the Finnish Institute of Health and Welfare. In the same institution, formerly he was the Director of the Department of Public Health and Welfare and Director of the Health Security Department, with the responsibilities for implementing COVID-19 measures. He also worked as a unit head at the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control in Stockholm, Sweden. So the floor is yours, Professor Salminen. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you also for inviting me to this finally exciting and soon.
Professor, we cannot really hear you well. Can you check your? You are cut. So.
How about now? Okay, better. Very good. Thank you again for inviting me. And this is a very timely moment as we are going towards the World Health Assembly, and there will be important decisions in the area of preparedness there. Just a little bit of my background in the actual COVID work. Basically, I was for 3 years completely engulfed by the pandemic work. I was at the time the head of the health security department at my institute, and I would say that about 70% of all our work, which is normally has to do with regular epidemics and disease prevention, was switched to pandemic response and just dealing with all the issues that came up. Through this work, I actually had to switch my work in such a way. We had a special team that daily met and planned the work. I was the contact person to the government. I had to sit in over 70 government sessions with the Prime Minister's leadership. And this really showed how complex this issue is. I would fully agree with what was said by the previous speaker about both the global impact and also the sort of whole of society impact which we saw during the pandemic, which I think in modern times at least was quite unprecedented. Now, if we think about the lessons that we learned, I think we have learned a lot, undoubtedly, but also there are things which we still need to deal with. And I think it's natural that there is some time that needs to take place, and so that we can sort of objectively look back and not only go into kind of a mode of defense on what we did and what we which tools we employed. We have to remember that since COVID was caused by a new, for humans, new coronavirus, we didn't really know everything from the beginning. Most of the planning that had been done was based on the scenario of an influenza pandemic, and this disease did indeed, although it had many similarities, it did behave differently also. So from the beginning, at least in Finland, the strategy was very much a strategy where we took the precautionary principle and really on the political level, the decision makers, as is their job, decided that the main emphasis will be on trying to prevent as much illness and death as we knew was coming as possible, which of course meant that many of the measures were quite extreme. As the prospect of the vaccine became more sort of true and real, in the beginning there was quite a lot of doubt whether or not that can be achieved in such a short time. Of course, the strategy changed and it became more a mitigation strategy. Now, there's a couple of lessons that I would like to highlight on the actual sort of measures that were taken and the way that the society responded. First of all, in this situation where things were new, it was very clear that the main emphasis was on the pandemic direct consequences, and that was what was addressed. We actually, in our own work at the institute, we several times when we were responding to the questions and requests from the national leadership, had to say that we cannot estimate all the consequences of these measures that we are recommending or thinking about if you look at the whole society. And I'm not just talking about economics, which is obvious, of course, but also the collateral damage that happened for sure to other sectors of both health, but also things like education and other preventive work. In Finland, we were lucky in the way that for example, the general vaccination program for children was not that much affected, but in many other parts of the world, this was a major worry that since resources had to be reshuffled, you had to actually pause many of the vaccination programs. There were many other such consequences. In Finland, there was a massive buildup of non-essential surgeries, for example, that had to be postponed with multiple consequences. Social impact was, of course, immense because just the restrictions that were in place meant that many families were put in very difficult positions. For example, people who were in the end stage of their life couldn't meet their families. Elderly people whose one spouse was perhaps in an institution couldn't meet the spouse who was maybe living at home still. Children could not go to school normally, which we are still seeing negative signs of. So these consequences, of course, were quite severe and are still visible. And I think there is one important lesson here is that we had not thought about this enough in advance, and how to deal with these questions and how to mitigate these questions properly. We of course tried our best during the pandemic, but in the sort of heat of the battle, it's quite difficult to be fully objective. And I'm still waiting for such a global assessment, actually, that would do a balanced and not sort of a defensive assessment on all the different measures. For example, we have a big question mark in Finland whether or not the school closures actually were necessary. I won't go into details, but we have done quite a lot of studies on that, and it's our conclusion is that at least the question of keeping the schools closed for a long time was not beneficial and was not even necessary for the pandemic management. Then, of course, there are other questions such as my region is part of the European Union, where the basic principle is free movement of people. And the first thing which was done very quickly was that countries closed their borders. Despite this, the pandemic spread. So this is also something that would need a balanced sort of assessment. I'm not saying we should not have closed the borders at all, but the sort of objective assessment, whether or not that was for the whole time a proper measure. And I think there are a couple of instances where Europe didn't do the right thing. For example, when Omicron emerged, or later on when the epidemic took hold in China, where multiple waves had already passed through Europe. The border closures were actually known not to be really effective anymore. The virus had already spread in the world. If we go to the actual lessons about the response on the sort of medical side, what we have seen is a couple of things. One is the necessary work to do for preparation in preparedness, be it stockpiling of materials, we were fortunate in that we had some stockpiles in Finland. We have actually an agency which is a bit sort of left over from even from the wartime in the 40s. That was still there, and we had some stockpiles. That helped us tremendously. The other thing is that if we look at the health systems, one of the weaknesses of the health systems is that, yes, we can shift even in countries that have a fairly comprehensive public health system. We can shift resources temporarily, but not on a long time. And this is very different from some other areas of preparedness. Let's think about, for example, something like a defense force, which is there, and the optimal situation is if it's never necessary to use it. Whereas the health system is there and it's always in full use. And I think in the long run, we should have a very sort of substantial thinking about whether or not we should build health systems that have a bit of leeway so that when there's a crisis, we are not immediately overwhelmed. I think this is a couple of the main points that I wanted to make, and I think I'll stop here because we have limited time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Salminel. I think this experience from countries is really useful. And as you rightly said, I mean, it's hard to get prepared for something that is so new and so novel. And we have learned from this, and it's great if we can integrate this new knowledge into our preparedness plan. So let's move now to another place in the world, and very far from Finland. Nearly the opposite, Sri Lanka, with Professor Palita Karunapeman, I hope I pronounce it well, who is the Director of the Health Information at the Ministry of Health in Sri Lanka. He was formerly the IHR focal point with WHO's Health Emergency Department, and formerly the Director of Quarantine in Sri Lanka's Ministry of Health. So, Dr. Palita, thank you very much for joining us. I see that you may be in transit somewhere, so thank you even more for making the time to tell us what were the lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic and how this experience has or will modify your preparedness efforts. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Yeah, may I know how much time I have?
7 minutes.
Okay, nice.
It's short.
Yeah. As Sylvia mentioned, that I've been working as a quarantine IHR focal point. During the pandemic, I was the focal point for this communication. So basically, when we think about the impact of pandemic, apart from health, we obviously know health sectors impacted a lot with high mortality and morbidity and the overburden of the health system. Apart from those things, like especially within the health sector, some of the vulnerable population are more affected, like maternal health, maybe mental health, some of the vulnerable population affected. Then certainly there's a huge impact on the economic side. So I know it's globally impacted, but especially countries weaker economic systems. They have impact because of the vulnerability of their economic situation. So that's one important account which we need to take into the account when you're preparing for future things, especially supply chains, especially collapse of tourism and trade. Those things are impacted heavily Sri Lanka. So those are the areas we affected for that. Then sometimes
Dr. Karuna, would you have earphones or something, because your voice is a bit cut, so I don't know how
am
we
I
can.
Audible? Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you, but sometimes it's cut. So
Yeah, sure. Then about maybe sometimes we forget the social impact. So really, it's really important, especially during the quarantine period, social lockdown period. There's huge impact on people's mental health, and the social impact is tremendous, especially with the education systems affected so much, and schools closed. So those are the areas. Then about especially political impact. Now, I mean, during this period, actually, we were elected as the president. Just after elected the president, the COVID pandemic came. Even with that high level of trust with the new government, we face a lot of challenges politically. And the decision taken during the COVID-19 period, I mean, uh, most of the decisions were sometimes the obvious, some certain things are linked to the political beliefs. So those are the kind of challenges we haven't uh, anticipated. Then uh, then basically there are other challenges like technological challenges, ethical dimensions of the actions we have taken, especially quarantine of the people, and so those and question very much, especially later on. So I would say those are the areas, especially when we are going to think the next pandemic. Those are the different areas which we must prepare uh, prepare for the next pandemic. So basically, uh, then if you are going, are we going for the second question as well in the first round? Or
Sylvie, you're on mute.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but your voice is sometimes cut. So can you check if you can have improved the sound somehow?
Yeah.
Because
I'll try.
I know
Yeah.
that you are traveling, so it might be a bit difficult and not necessarily due to your
Yeah.
phone, but if we can.
Right. Right. Then basically those were the challenges, and I mean, and preparedness should come from not only from health side, but from overall other sectors. So basically, even during the peace time, the activities now after the pandemic, we have done a lot of assessments and we prepared the national action plan for health security. We incorporate lot of learnings, which and there were positive things, there were negative things, and we incorporate some of these most of these lessons learned to the national action plan. So that is the very positive side of this. Especially as now earlier we prepared the NAPS in 2019. Because of the COVID-19, we couldn't do some of the things. So, but fortunate enough, after several assessments, we were able to incorporate. We were able to incorporate these preparedness activities to the NAPS. Uh, so, uh, with the limited time, I think I'll stop there. So, if there's any question, if there are any other questions, I can answer. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and very sorry that the technology didn't help us so much. And if we still have time, and if you find a good connection, we can give you back the floor at the end of when other speakers are spoken. So I would like now to, but first continue to this tour, the table, and this time we will move to another region, now to the Caribbean, and I will give the floor to Dr. Lisa Indar, She's Executive Director of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA. Her career is marked by a robust leadership, strategic management, health diplomacy, resource mobilization, and multi-sectoral partnership. Very impressive, Dr. Indar. And you also served previously as the Director of Surveillance, Disease Prevention and Control, as well as the head of the Regional Tourism and Health Program. So please, Dr. Indar, share with us your experience of COVID-19 and also how it will impact the preparedness, the future preparedness in the Caribbean region. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank WHO for inviting the Caribbean to be part of this very important webinar. Just to give some context, you've already been introduced. We, CARPHA, where I work, is the Regional Public Health Agency. We are the sole integrated public health agency for the Caribbean, and we serve 26 countries. So when it came to responding to COVID or to any other public health threats, which CARPHA is mandated to by its heads of government, we have to always look at the context. And then you have to need to, this is a major lesson for us, looking at context before we respond. What is the context? The context is that we are, the Caribbean consists of many, many small and even smaller islands, from as small as 4,000 population to as big as over 2 to 3 million population. But these countries vary in terms of surveillance, laboratory, workforce capacity. They are very porous, their borders are very porous, and they're very interconnected. So an outbreak of an illness in one country, it can be easily spread. The other facet is that we are tourism dependent. It meant we have travelers from all over the world. So when COVID came, and like any other diseases, the first case was an imported case. And we saw through travel how COVID spread through the region. So any approach we had to take, in terms of prevention, we had to look at all these different facets, and also from a regional approach, how do we have the best approach that better serves all these varying capacities and different scenarios in the region. So what did we learn? CARPHA had to use a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach, and it started at the highest level. Regional coordination. We needed to work with our heads of government, our prime ministers, our ministers of health. We had to work with the many different sectors that was involved, because a major lesson learned was that this required all of society approach. It was not just a health approach. So we had to work with sectors like tourism and security and education and finance and all the different sectors. And we had to also instill regional coordination among the different agencies, meaning not just CARPHA, but other agencies like that were investing and were working in the region, PAHU and UKHSA. And finally, with the countries to work with all the relevant persons or the sectors. So we needed that regional coordination. So at the highest level, this was our first lesson, is that you needed to ensure proper regional coordination. We are CARICOM agencies, so at any one point, CARPHA was ensuring at the highest level, we had coordination at the highest level, coordination at country, coordination at sector level, and then coordination at the different disciplines, whether it be surveillance and laboratory. The other thing that we learned was the need for that multi-sectoral integrated approach. CARPHA used a multi-pronged approach in terms of how it responded to COVID-19. What did that mean? We worked with regional coordination. We developed and we serve as the regional referral laboratory, serving all the different countries. At that time, countries were not even able to test for COVID-19. So we had to make sure at that time we were testing for these different countries, as well as building the capacity as we went along. We developed surveillance. We were putting out, surveillance reports, and in the beginning, twice per day, and then twice per week, and then once per week, and we went on for a really long while. So we had surveillance, we had laboratory, we had coordination, and then we had other things. We had the tourism and health program, because we were so tourism dependent. We could not ignore that fact. So we had to work. We created a COVID-19 tourism task force with the tourism agencies and bodies, where we were sending out the correct message. Tourists were coming to the Caribbean, needed a PCR test. And we needed to enforce certain, NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions, so that we protect the countries and the movement, protect ports of entry. That was important. The other thing we supported, because we were dealing with regions with limited capacity, we helped with procurement, laboratory supplies, supplies for prevention, for control. We then had special programs such as the Caribbean Regulatory Agency that was helping us to look at the whole issue of vaccinations and regulations, and being able to say, what was recommended, and telling our countries. And then that was supported by our rigorous communications networks and networks to facilitate transport and specimen collection and movement of people. So we had this multifaceted approach, and we knew that we needed to go at all levels. We also worked with different bodies, Universities of the West Indies, SEDIMA, Impacts, and others, so that the approach was also very much coordinated. So the second lesson we learned is that you needed a coordinated approach. We needed a multifaceted approach. And this multifaceted approach means working with different sectors at the highest level, and then working in the different sectors at the ground level. Lab needed to talk to epidemiology, and they needed to include the tourism sector, and they needed to include the different agencies that were working, and the different agencies was not just health, but tourism and others to get involved. And then the third lesson we learned was the need for transparent information sharing. So during our stint, we produced over 250 COVID-19 reports. We had regional guidelines for entry, for re-entry, for movement of persons, for voting, and so many more. But these were regional guidelines, and to be adopted by countries. Each country, was autonomous. All we could have done too was given guidelines and see how we protected the region. But the proof of our surveillance depended on getting information from all our member states. So we had to build trust, and we needed information sharing, because the islands were so small, so porous, so interconnected. You could have seen that a COVID case in one country, and you could have seen a rapid spread, within a country and then to other countries. So we needed the same harmonized measures, and we needed information to be shared timely. At that time, we needed information. You had a COVID case, you had a cluster that had to be instant. And it was not always done. We did not always get that information on time. That did impact, and that did impact on spread, and how CAFA would have helped another country prevent, rapid spread. So our third lesson that was learned was the need for timely information sharing and transparent information sharing from all, and that information sharing had to be digital, because it really helped to really track the spread across countries and to mitigate. So going straight on to the third part of the question, what measures we have done in terms of our preparedness efforts since COVID? Well, we have strengthened our integrated early warning system. COVID-19 taught us that we needed digital systems, and they needed to be early warning. And this is a key as we move towards pandemic preparedness. Our normal systems are not, needs to be ramped up. They must have an early warning mechanism. What do I mean by that? There must be a threshold, early warning mechanism that sends an alert to all the relevant persons if we have a public health threat. It may be one case of a measles, or it may be 2% of gastro, depending on the scientific rigor. But we need early warning systems. So I want to really urge everyone here that all your surveillance system, every single one of your surveillance systems must have an early warning mechanism. If it does not have an early warning mechanism, then we would not have learned our lesson towards pandemic preparedness and response. So this is one thing CAFA is working with. We have a pandemic fund grant, and we are working at strengthening our communicable disease surveillance, our tourism, our vector-borne, and all the other communicable disease surveillance to ensure we are inputting an early warning mechanism. That's the first thing. So the normal surveillance systems needs to be ramped up for early warning, and they must have an early warning mechanism. We are enhancing our mechanisms for timely and complete data collection for both our local and visitor using specific CAFA developed tools. So we have done some novel tools like, mass gathering surveillance with digital real-time outputs, timeliness matrix, which allows us in the Caribbean setting or when the normal setting of 717, we need to be reduced because you can't wait for 7 days to identify a case of measles, that occurs in the Caribbean setting. We'll have a massive outbreak. So depending on the setting, if it's in a tourism setting on a small, small islands, we need to detect fast. So we had Caribbean tailored timelines for responding to public health emergencies. And we are now designing our emergency and response training with these tailor-specific tools, the mass gathering, the timeliness matrix, emergency and response mechanism suited for the Caribbean situation. We are working towards timely alerts. We do produce watch and briefs and real-time reports, but we need to ramp it up. If something is happening in our region, we know that within a daytime, we must respond. And depending on where it's happening, we need to respond even faster. So for travelers' health, we respond within 24 hours if a case is occurring, and it's confidential because you want to protect your tourism product. We have leverage mechanism, regional mechanisms. So CAFA is the chair of the Regional Coordinating Mechanism for Health Security. That worked really well. Yes.
Sorry, we just have little time left, so if you can wrap up.
Wrap up, no problem.
It would be very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. So CAFA would have worked with many networks like the Regional Coordinating Mechanism to leverage coordination and GORN and others, and we are building capacity, regional capacity, as well as we are enhancing surveillance systems for early warning, and also finally implementing the pandemic fund so that we are ramping up all our measures towards surveillance, coordination, laboratory capacity, as well as workforce development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Indar. It was really informative and great to know more about the Caribbean region, which we know indeed much more for the tourism than for the response to epidemics, but it's really, really important. So now let's move to another region, the African region, with Dr. Abdul Salam Gay. And Dr. Salam, can you talk about what the top lessons learned from COVID-19 and how this will shape your preparedness moving forward? Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sylvie. And sorry, trying to do a lot of things at the same time. I'm currently in South Sudan and working with the team out there. Just to say that the COVID-19 was an experience, even if it was a painful one. In Africa, as I imagine all my colleagues has already said, there is a lot of lesson that was learned from the COVID-19. And I will just try here to summarize as much as possible how we were able to really take advantage of those situations and try to develop the system. I think one of the first things in Africa that was noted from everywhere is many of the countries realized the importance of multilateralism. If elsewhere, sometimes multilateralism was minimized in Africa because maybe of our difficulty to enter into the solution was developed. Some organization like African Union invested a lot to make sure that Africa CDC is developed, has the authority and the resources they need in order to support them. And since the COVID-19, you have seen an Africa CDC that has grown so much in terms of capacity and in terms of also governance and being supported. There is also on the multilateralism, a lot of regional economic organization that was not initially very interested on health have seen their portfolio on health very grown a lot. We talk about, for example, the ECAS, the Central African countries that really have now a department in health. Even the West African country used to have a department, WAHO, but the WAHO has grown also in a proportionate way that Africa CDC did. And also even in Afro, our role in emergency has been really important since the beginning, but with COVID-19 in many of our country, the WHO in their country offices has gained a lot of more respect, more consideration and credibility, and also was able to access within the government at levels that are not ever accessed before. WHO representatives are now talking more often with the presidents, talking with the prime minister, and a lot of other ministers within the countries, which did not happen often before the COVID-19. So in general, I believe that one of the lessons that we learned was that there is the importance of multilateralism, and the countries has given more consideration to the organization that were there and that are helping now to coordinate. It makes the thing a little bit more difficult, but we are working on it, and it gives definitely more opportunity. The second lesson learned from the African country was that when COVID-19 hit, all the countries in a time of few months were hit at the same time and needed support at the same time. The emergency governance before was made in a way that some resources was available for Africa or for the world. And we were assuming that it is not all the world that are going to have emergency at the same time. And the resources will be moved from one place to another based on needs. When all the places had the same need, the system was blocked. So countries was led by themselves. And some countries was able to respond more or less in some pillar, but none of them was able to respond on all the pillar. They felt sometimes abandoned. And they started from trust and to develop their own response until it became more or less effective. And the result, we know that we had less death that was planned for the COVID-19. The result as a lesson learned also is that the countries realize that they have to have their own capacity. And they also realize, this is another one that is important to notice, they consider themselves as experts. By going through the COVID-19, having a result of less death as planned, almost all the countries now, when you go to a country, the first thing they're going to say is that they know so much how to respond to emergency that their experience need to be shared by with the rest of the world. It is true, they have learned a lot, but sometimes also it is dangerous, and it created an issue, which means that some countries started to respond by themselves to emergency that they did not have capacity to do. Or any other country in the world, for example, when you have a Marburg in a developed country, they're going to have some time of hesitation and some issues. But in many countries in Africa now, we are seeing countries responding to some emergency almost by themselves, and sometimes it is dangerous. Anyhow, that lesson learned of the need of local capacity has created workforce development, where we see a lot of pre-service training on emergency and public health. We have also a lot of initiative in terms of local manufacturing of therapeutic, vaccine, local manufacturing of diagnostic. Some of them was very successful. We have some experience that are moving very far in Institut Pasteur, Dakar, another experience that is also very successful in Rwanda, another in South Africa, even though the South Africa one had some setback because once they start producing, they didn't have enough market to really make it as a sustained financially speaking. Another part that came also for the realizing that they need to have local capacity is the development of the Public Health Emergency Operations Center, the local CDC, or the National Public Health Agency, whatever you call it. They did not call it the same way, but all the countries start having an initiative of developing their own institution to help to prepare and to respond to emergencies. In WHO Afro, we had a very direct support to 36 countries that we supported, but it is more than that. Out of our 47 countries, almost 45 of them have the initiative in order to respond themselves to emergencies. So this is another lesson learned. It is the need of local capacity, the importance of multilateralism and the need of local capacity. And finally, another lesson learned, and I don't know if I'm going to call it a lesson learned or a problem raised, is the funding. They realize also that funding has to come from themselves. They usually try to look for local capacity to fund, and we were really impressed in many countries by initiative that was not government-driven, the initiative that was citizen-driven, in order to put money, even if it is meager resources, they put it together. And as you put a lot together, it arrived to a quantity that was impressive. I was WHO representative in Mauritania at that time, but the diaspora in Mauritania and also the local economy was able to mobilize funding ever done in the history of Mauritania. And they were able to fund a lot of their responses. And that financial part of the COVID-19 was tried to be reproduced after the COVID-19, but it has not been very successful so far. And what we are doing here in Afro, in collaboration with other agencies, Africa CDC, is to work with countries to develop with them a kind of funding plan of their National Action Plan for Health Security. And this is done around the pandemic fund principle. When each round of the pandemic fund, we have a very strong team that's gonna also coordinate other agencies in order to help countries have a very strong application. And the application is not only for the pandemic fund, the application is just to put a budget and a clear objective into the need of the country. So today we have in all our 47 countries such a plan. Some of us have won some money through the pandemic fund. I think it is good, and we are supporting them to implement it. But the most important is also those who did not win, they have the plan. And we are working with them to mobilize local money, but also to mobilize additional funding in order to address their situation. So I will stop there on just citing three. There is many. But we have three lessons learned, and each of them are driving now our planning system. Importance of multilateralism, need of local capacity, and the funding need to be organized and to be coordinated. Thank you very much, Dr. Sylvie.
Thank you very much, Salam. And it's really great to hear the experience from Africa. Which is, of course, different from the Caribbean, but this is why I think it's so important to have this kind of exchange between different places in the world, because clearly the lessons are different, and probably we need to also adapt preparedness to this. So in a short summary, we can say that with Professor Salminen, we have seen that many public health and social measures have been implemented during COVID-19, but we didn't measure really their consequences ahead of time. And it had an impact on population, societies, economies, and other sectors, but we didn't know really what was those consequences before implementing them. And so it's very important that next preparedness takes into account the consequences and impact of these social measures. Among them are, of course, school closure, border closure, and so on. And we need also to learn from the COVID-19 that these pandemics are long episodes, long events. And so we need also to be ready for something that will last years. In Sri Lanka, we have seen that it has an impact, the pandemic has had an impact on every sector. And so we need to anticipate this impact, but also we need to work with those other sectors for the preparedness. It cannot be only health preparedness, it has to be multi-sectoral preparedness. And this is also the lessons learned in the Caribbean, that the multi-sectoral approach are really essential. And not only across sector, but also we need also this coordination across levels, from global, regional, and local. And the regional coordination is particularly important when countries are geographically close and are interconnected. They may not have exactly the same problems, but still, when it's about transmission of viruses, they are all at risk. And so it's important also to have this regional collaboration. And this has to be supported by first a very strong early warning system to be aware when something happens, that everybody can get ready to respond to it, but also throughout the crisis with a transparent and timely and harmonized information sharing that will help everybody to respond seamlessly. Of course, CARFA talked about leveraging new technology, new tools, and also to enhance the training. This was also discussed by our colleague from Salam from Afro. He highlighted also the importance of multilateralism, countries working together, because pandemics are not only a national event, it requires everybody to work together. And COVID-19, fortunately, has raised awareness about the health portfolio in many agencies and also in many other sectors. And it's important also to have local response, have locally trained responders, but also develop new ways of funding preparedness and response. And COVID-19 has shown in Africa that there are some citizen-driven initiatives that can be very powerful. And we need to support those initiatives so that they are sustained until the next crisis. And of course, this could be complemented by international solidarity. So with this, I think we have a very holistic and ambitious picture. And I really like that we are not ending in a very negative note, but on the contrary, we all know that COVID-19 has been very challenging, has been very painful to all of us, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think if we continue to work together, not only can we be better prepared for the next crisis, but also we can really live all in a more safer world. So, and this is what we would like to see out of the GPMB report and out of this seminar. So now we don't have really time for questions. I will just hand over back to my colleague Maya Kita for some remarks on GPMB report. Over to you, Maya, and thanks a lot to all of you.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. With this, I would like to thank all the panelists and speakers and all of our participants. Since we are over time already, I would like to be very brief. But under the title, The New Face of Pandemic Preparedness, we're very glad to be able to run two high-level important webinars consecutively. They are two webinars with many interactions over the Zoom chat, as well as feedback received over email that will feed into this year's GPMB report as a valuable source of information. The GPMB report is not only a product, but it also serves as a door opener to many opportunities for united global pandemic preparedness. From reflection comes responsibility, and from dialogue comes direction. We learned that every region and every country has a story, and every story offers a lesson we cannot afford to ignore. We are currently aiming to publish the concise version of the report before the summer, followed by the technical report later on, which you will have access to from our website. Once again, whilst thanking you all for your participation, important links on how to stay connected with us will be provided in the Zoom chat. And this will enable you to stay on top of when new publications or future webinars are announced. So we highly recommend you to follow our social media accounts. Thank you very much once again. I hand over the floor back to Supriya.
Thank you very much, Maya. And on behalf of EPI-WIN, I'd like to thank all the speakers, Dr. Mika, Dr. Maha Rabat, Dr. Lisa Indar, Dr. Guyer, and Dr. Palta. I hope I haven't missed anyone, but we've had extremely interesting perspectives and different perspectives from different parts of the world. And I'd like to thank Dr. Sylvie Briand for leading this. As Maya said, there were 2 webinars. This is the second of the 2 webinars, both of them extremely insightful. And you can see from the comments on the chat how people have been engaged and interested. I'd like to thank Maya Kita for all the hard work, not just today, but for making these webinars happen, organizing it, reaching out to everyone, promoting it. So thank you very much on behalf of EPI-WIN for the hard work. As always in EPI-WIN, we like to share knowledge. So I hope this relationship will continue. We look forward to all the participants joining us again. Next week's EPI-WIN is on mass gatherings and religious and political events. We look forward to you joining us, and we look forward to also how EPI-WIN contributes to the GPMB report from all the participants and all the speakers. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers and participants. Bye.